The house was eerily quiet that evening, the kind of silence that made the smallest noises seem louder than they should be. A ticking clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards, as if the house itself was exhaling. I sat on the living room couch, pretending to be engrossed in my phone, but my thoughts were scattered. My stepdad, Daniel, was due home any minute. I had grown used to his presence over the past 5 years, but tonight, something felt different. My mother was away visiting her sister for the weekend, leaving just the two of us in the house. Normally, that wouldn't have mattered, but lately I had been uneasy. I glanced toward the hallway mirror and caught my own reflection, eyes restless, lips slightly parted, the tension in my shoulders obvious even to myself. It wasn't like I had done anything wrong. Not really. But secrets have a way of making you feel guilty, even when they remain unspoken. Then, the sound of the front door unlocking jolted me upright. Daniel stepped inside, shaking off the lingering chill from the autumn night. His sharp blue eyes flicked to me as he set his keys down on the entryway table. He wasn't a man of many words. His presence alone was enough to fill a room. There was something effortlessly intimidating about him. Though he had never given me a reason to fear him, he was kind in his own way, reserved but attentive, the kind of man whose approval always felt just out of reach. "You're up late," he said, his voice steady, neutral. I shrugged, locking my phone and setting it aside. "Just not tired yet." He nodded, hanging his jacket on the coat rack. "Your mom called. She'll be back Sunday evening." "I know." Silence stretched between us for a moment, heavy and thick. Then out of nowhere he asked, "Everything okay?" My heart stammered. It was such a simple question, but the weight behind it made my stomach twist. "Yeah," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just a long day." He studied me for a beat longer than felt comfortable, then gave a slow nod. "All right." He turned toward the kitchen, and I exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly. But just as I was about to pick up my phone again, I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a notification, not from my phone. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly where that sound had come from, Daniel's phone, and I knew exactly what it meant. The sound of the notification still echoed in my head as Daniel walked into the kitchen. I swallowed hard, my hands tightening into fists on my lap. There was no way it could be what I thought it was. But I had been so careful. Heart pounding. I turned my phone screen back on and pulled up my messages. Nothing. My chest tightened as I switched to the app one dreaded most right now. My private chat on an LGBTQ forum. The one I use under a fake name. The one where I talk to guys like me, guys who understood. I tapped the screen. And there it was. A message marked as read. Except I hadn't opened it. The room felt smaller, like the walls were slowly caving in. My breathing shallowed. My stomach twisted painfully as realization sank in a slow, creeping horror. Daniel had seen it. Somehow, some way he had seen it. I tried to think, to remember if I had ever logged into my account on his phone, even for a second, but I wouldn't have done that, right? I had been careful, paranoid, even had I left my phone open? Had he seen a preview of the message on my lock screen? A chair scraped against the kitchen floor, jolted me back to the present. He was coming back. I barely had time to shove my phone under a pillow before he reappeared in the doorway, a glass of water in his hand. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes had shifted, something I couldn't place. I swallowed hard. "You, need something?" He studied me for a long moment before taking a slow sip of water. "No, just thinking. Thinking." The word sent a chill down my spine. I forced a nervous chuckle. "About what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the armchair across from me and sat down, placing the glass on the coffee table between us. "About you." A lump formed in my throat. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but I could feel the heat rising to my face. "Me?" "You've been different lately." His voice was calm, measured, but there was an underlying weight to his words. Distant, jumpy. I forced a laugh, but it sounded thin. "Just stressed." School life. He nodded slowly, as if considering my words. But then his eyes flicked to my phone, just for a second, a quick, deliberate glance. It was enough. My stomach dropped. You sure there's nothing else you want to tell me? His voice was so casual, so controlled, and that terrified me more than if he'd been angry. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My mind raced, trying to find an escape, an excuse, anything. But I had nothing. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then he sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Look, I'm not trying to corner you. He exhaled, his gaze softening. I know, okay? My heart stopped. I know. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything I had ever heard in my life. I gripped the edge of the couch, my nails digging into the fabric. My voice cracked, so I cleared my throat and tried again. I don't know what you're talking about. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen a few times before turning it toward me. I stopped breathing. There it was. My chat, my messages, my words, everything. The room spun. My ears rang. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. I wanted to run, to disappear, to wake up and find that this was just a nightmare. But I was wide awake, and Daniel was still watching me. You left your account open on my phone a few nights ago, he said quietly. I didn't mean to see it at first, but then I did. And he hesitated, as if searching for the right words. I needed to understand. Understand. What did that even mean? I forced myself to breathe, even though my lungs felt like they were caving in. Are you mad? His brow furrowed slightly. Mad? I nodded, gripping my hands together so tightly my knuckles turned white. I'm... The words stuck in my throat like thorns. I had never said them out loud. Not anyone. Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know what I am. That stung more than if he had just said yes. He looked away for a moment, staring at some invisible point on the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. Does your mom know? I shook my head quickly. No. Anyone else? No. He let out a slow breath. Jesus. A horrible thought clawed its way into my mind, gripping me so tightly I felt like I might choke on it. I swallowed. Are you going to tell her? Daniel looked at me then, really looked at me. His expression was complicated, like he was waging a silent battle with himself. I don't know, he admitted. And just like that, my entire world teetered on the edge of a knife. The silence stretched between us again, thick with everything left unsaid. I wanted to beg him not to say anything, to promise me that he wouldn't tell. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words, because I wasn't sure I wanted to hear his answer. Finally, Daniel sighed and ran a hand through his hair. It's late. You should get some rest. That was it? I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. Okay. I stood up on shaky legs, my mind still spinning. But as I turned to leave, he spoke again. Hey. I stopped, my back still to him. You don't have to be afraid of me, he said quietly. I didn't know if I believed him. So I just nodded and walked away, even though my heart was still racing, even though I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint glow of my phone screened, the only source of light in the dark room. My mind refused to settle. Over and over, I replayed the conversation with Daniel, dissecting every word, every pause, every unreadable look in his eyes. He knew. He wasn't angry. Not exactly. But he wasn't okay with it, either. And that was somehow worse. At some point, exhaustion took over, dragging me into a restless sleep. But it didn't last. A noise, soft, muffled. I stirred, groggy, my head thick with half-formed dreams. Another noise, a footstep. Close, too close. I forced my eyes open, my pulse sluggish at first, until I saw it, a shadow, standing just outside my bedroom door. My breath caught in my throat. The hallway light was off, but the faint glow from the street lamp outside cast long, uneven lines to the barely opened door. The figure stood still, unmoving, silent, watching. Daniel. I knew it was him. Even in the dark, I recognized the broad set of his shoulders, the way he carried himself. But why was he standing there? I swallowed, my throat dry as sandpaper. My chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths as I struggled to decide what to do. Pretend to be asleep? Say something? Before I could make a choice, the shadow moved. Slowly, almost hesitantly, the door creaked open another inch. A rush of cold air swept into the room, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. My fingers tightened around the blanket, my heart hammering against my ribs. He still didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence was unbearable, stretching thick and heavy between us. Then, finally, "I couldn't sleep," he murmured. His voice was quiet, but it carried in the stillness of the night. I swallowed again. Me neither. Another pause. I could barely make out his expression in the dim light, but there was something about the way he stood there, like he was waiting for something. A confession? A confrontation? I keep thinking about earlier, he admitted. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something I couldn't quite place. I sat up slightly, my back pressing against the headboard. Me too. He exhaled through his nose, shifting his weight. I don't know what to do with this, you know. I tensed. This, like it was a problem, like I was a problem. I didn't want to find out like that, he continued, rubbing a hand over his face. I didn't want to find out at all. The word stung. I looked away, my jaw clenching. You don't have to do anything, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence. Then, that's not true. I frowned, my stomach twisting. What does that mean? Daniel let out a slow breath, stepping inside the room. Just a few inches, but enough to make my pulse spike. I can't just pretend I don't know, he said. I can't unsee it. My chest tightened. So what then? You're going to tell Mom? He hesitated. Then, finally, he shook his head. No. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. Then why are you here? My voice was quieter now, almost wary. His gaze flicked to me, then away. He looked conflicted, torn between something he couldn't or wouldn't say. I don't know, he admitted. The honesty in his voice made my stomach flip. The room felt unbearably small. The air between us was thick, charged with something unspoken, something neither of us dared to name. His eyes met mine again, and for a brief, impossible second, I thought, no, I had to be imagining it. I blinked, willing the thought away. But Daniel's gaze lingered. Not angry, not disgusted. Something else. Something worse. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head as if trying to clear a thought from his mind. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, shutting the door behind him, leaving me alone, shaken, confused, and with a feeling in my chest that I didn't dare examine too closely. Not yet. The next morning felt surreal, like waking up from a dream that still clung to the edges of my mind. Except it wasn't a dream. Daniel had been there, standing in my doorway, watching me, speaking in that quiet, heavy voice that carried too much meaning in too few words. I could still hear the soft creak of the floorboards as he stepped into my room, still see the look in his eyes, something restrained, something searching. I sat on the edge of my bed, rubbing a hand over my face, trying to shake the feeling clinging to my skin like static. What the hell was that? And why couldn't I stop thinking about it? I dragged myself out of bed and forced myself to move through the motions, brushing my teeth, getting dressed, pretending everything was fine. But my hands felt unsteady. My body felt too aware of itself, like I had been rewired overnight. When I finally stepped out into the hallway, the house was eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that made me think he was avoiding me. Or maybe I was avoiding him. I made my way downstairs, my stomach twisting. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, but there was no sign of Daniel in the kitchen. His keys were gone from the table. He had left. I exhaled, gripping the counter. Good, right? I wasn't sure. I poured myself a cup of coffee, but my hands trembled slightly as I lifted it to my lips. My mind wouldn't stop replaying last night. The way he hesitated before leaving. The way he looked at me, like he saw something in me that he wasn't ready to confront. I didn't know what scared me more, the fact that he knew my secret or the fact that I didn't understand his reaction. The day dragged on, slow and suffocating. I checked my phone too many times, waiting for a text from him. Something, anything, nothing. By the time evening rolled around, I was restless, pacing the living room, flinching at every passing car outside. And then, finally, the sound of the front door unlocking. My stomach lurched. I turned, heart hammering, as Daniel stepped inside. His movements were slow, deliberate. He set his keys down, shrugged off his jacket, but still, he didn't look at me. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, a tension so tangible I could almost reach out and touch it, say something, break the silence. But my mouth wouldn't move. Finally, Daniel let out a slow breath and walked past me, heading toward the kitchen, like nothing had happened, like last night hadn't changed anything, except it had, and we both knew it. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to work. You didn't come home for lunch. He paused, his back to me, hands braced against the counter. Had some errands to run. A lie, or maybe just an excuse. Either way, I felt like a slap. I took a step closer, hating the uncertainty in my own voice. Are we going to talk about it? He didn't move, didn't turn around. What's there to talk about? He asked, his tone unreadable. I clenched my jaw. I don't know. Maybe the fact that you... I stopped myself before I could say stood in my doorway last night like you were trying to figure something out that neither of us understand. Instead, I swallowed and forced the words out. You're acting weird. Daniel finally turned then, his blue eyes locking onto mine. You think I'm acting weird? My stomach tightened. There was something in the way he said it, like he was testing the words. I crossed my arms, more defensive than I meant to be. Yeah, you've barely looked at me all day. His jaw tensed, his fingers drumming against the counter before he let out a short, humorless laugh. I'm trying to give you space. Space? I frowned. Why? Something flickered across his face. A hesitation. A moment too long before he answered. Because I don't know what to say to you. His voice was low, measured, and suddenly I felt it. The shift, the thing that had been hanging between us since last night. My pulse kicked up. What does that mean? Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair. It means I need time. Time to process, to understand, to figure out why he had been standing in my doorway at 2 a.m. looking at me like that. I nodded slowly, my throat dry. Okay. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. And for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. Some things aren't meant to be understood. Some things just are. And whatever this was between us, whatever this was turning into, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, I couldn't sleep. Again. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts a tangled mess of confusion, frustration, and something I wasn't ready to name. Daniel needed time. But for what? To figure out how he felt about me being gay? To decide if he was going to tell my mom? Or was it something else? Something neither of us had the words for. I turned onto my side, staring at the door. It was closed this time. Locked. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I was afraid of myself. Afraid of the way my stomach had twisted last night when I saw him standing there. Afraid of the way his voice had sounded. Low, uncertain, careful. Afraid of what I thought I saw in his eyes. Afraid that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one struggling with something unspoken. I shut my eyes tight, willing sleep to take me. But then, a sound. Soft. Deliberate. My breath hitched. I opened my eyes, my body going still. A shadow moved outside my door. Slowly. Hovering. Waiting. I stared, my heart hammering, pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The doorknob shifted. Just slightly. Not turning. Just testing. A jolt of panic shot through me. And something else. Something dark. Something I couldn't let myself feel. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the sheets beneath me, waiting for him to walk away, waiting for the door to open, waiting for something I wasn't sure I wanted. Then silence. The shadow disappeared. Footsteps retreated down the hall. The tension in my chest didn't ease, because I knew this wasn't over, not even close. And whatever was happening between Daniel and me, whatever line we were walking, we were getting closer to the edge, too close, and one of us was bound to fall.